Hi friends, I welcome you on my YouTube channel. I'm super excited to share with you my review of the watercolor pad or watercolor sketchbook Winsor Newton 300 GSM that contains as well 25% cotton. The size of this sketchbook is 7 inches per 10 inches, and usually this sketchbook I use for my Patreon classes where I share how to draw and paint different travel sketches with wet on wet and wet on dry technique. I already made a review of this watercolor sketchbook once I have bought it, but in today's video I want to share my final thoughts and as well to share with you some of the works that I have already painted into it. So, all of us know that the paper for any artist is very important tool because if we have a good proper paper, it leads to better results, specifically in watercolors. And if the paper is not as good, it will be more difficult to get to the desired results, and as well it will be not the same beauty at the end. But before we start, my name is Aula, I'm a sketch illustrator and watercolorist, and from 2020 I'm an art teacher too. During this video, I will be sharing with you all the sketches that I have done in this sketchbook because I already finished one sketchbook of Winsor & Newton and I loved really much this watercolor paper. I will also be sharing a glimpse of some of my Patreon classes. I will be sharing a small part of my Patreon class of this work, where I will be showing you how this work is, how this paper is working with pencil drawing, with markers, or with micron pens, and as well within this work I will be sharing how I work with wet on wet technique and wet on dry technique, and my thoughts about this watercolor paper. Now let's talk about the technical side. This paper is 300 GSM or 140 lb, which strikes a good balance between thickness and manageability. The 25% cotton content gives it that high quality feel and enhances its durability. You won't have to worry about your paper buckling under the heavy washes. Let's talk about the texture of this paper. One of the standout features of this paper is its textured surface. It's designed to enhance the luminosity and vibrancy of watercolors, giving your artwork that unique touch. Paper roughness plays a significant role in the drawing process when using products of watercolor paper. In our case, it is Winsor Newton Sketchbook. The roughness of the paper's surface texture can affect how the drawing materials interact with it. For example, rough paper, in this case, this is a rough paper, provide us more tooth for better grip of pencils, allowing for richer and more textured results. Instead, when working on a very detailed work, it is preferred to have a smoother paper. In my case, my main idea is to work with watercolors and not with drawing. In this case, this is a travel sketch that it is a very detailed one. We need to draw it. But what I can say is that this paper resists perfectly for this kind of detailed drawing. In this specific work, I apply the loosing technique. It is when we apply one color, then we apply another color, and we leave the colors to blend beautifully one into another. This rough paper works just great for this kind of works because the roughness of the paper creates these textured vibes as well. Now we proceed with micron pen. Using a micron pen on rough paper, like this Winsor Newton sketchbook, can yield interesting results. The rough texture of the paper may provide additional friction, allowing the pen's tip to catch on the paper's fibers and resulting in a more textured and expressive line quality. This can be particularly useful for creating dynamic and visually engaging drawings with a lot of character. In my case, I'm using a brush pen and not a pencil. And it is not a micron pen, but it is a Japanese one that I just bought from my last trip to Japan. However, keep in mind that the rough texture might cause the micron pen's tip to wear out more quickly compared to smoother paper surfaces. If the paper is very rough, it could potentially cause the pen's tip to snag or fray, affecting the line quality. I found out that on this paper with my brush pen, it is slightly difficult to create a straight line, and the quality of the line is more vibrant. But because it is a travel sketch, I think that this is even better because it recreates the vibe of this travel of quick sketch, of the idea of quick sketch. The full class will be available next week on my Patreon, so you can join my Patreon. You have 7 days free trial to try any of the travel sketches or paintings that I have already uploaded. Let's move to another work that will be available on Patreon in 2 weeks. It is about the field of lavender flowers, and I think that this paper works just really well for my most beloved techniques like wet on wet and wet on dry technique. The wet on wet technique involves applying wet paint or water to a wet paper surface, allowing colors to blend and create soft and fluid effects. When using this technique on this paper, there are a few considerations that you have to take into account, like for example texture interaction. The rough surface of the paper can affect the way the wet paint spreads, so it might result in more broken textures and interesting interactions between the paint and the paper fibers. Then, about color blending. This rough texture of this paper can make color blending a bit unpredictable. But if you have some experience, you will see and will control it more over the time. What I like about this paper is that the drying time is longer than on a smoother paper because rough paper usually retain moisture longer and affecting drying times. In summer and when it is really hot in the house, it is advantageous for longer blending periods. And it requires a little bit more patience if it is cooler outside. But obviously you can use a hair dryer whenever you wish. Experimentation and practice will help you understand how to best utilize the paper's texture to achieve your desired results. I would say in my case that I really love wet on wet technique and I find this paper just a perfect one to work. When using wet on dry technique, allow each layer to dry before adding another layer of paint. In this case, you will build the color intensity easier and the value more interesting by layering different washes. The rough texture of the paper can create a beautiful interplay of light and shadow. And when experimenting with different techniques like you have seen till now, like mixing up the colors straight on the paper, using wet on wet technique, using wet on dry technique, you can enjoy different and very unique techniques and effects on this rough paper that provides this watercolor sketchbook. I can talk a lot about how good is this paper for different techniques, for layering technique, for wet and wet and wet and dry technique, but you should remember that practice is key when working with watercolors. I've prepared a few tests to showcase how the paper handles different techniques, from wet on wet to fine details. The absorbency of this paper is crucial for achieving those delicate washes and layered effects. So far, it's exceeding my expectations. The colors remain vibrant, the details are crisp, and the paper held up beautifully. Here, for example, you can see that I am using more wet and dry technique. and it also has a wonderful and exciting washes. In conclusion, the Winsor & Newton 300 GSM 25% cotton watercolor paper gets a solid thumbs up from me. Its texture, height, and cotton content make it an excellent choice for both beginners and experienced artists alike. If you are looking to elevate your watercolor game, give this paper a try. As final thoughts, I think that this paper is a perfect paper in terms of cost and the quality of it, because I think that this sketchbook costed me almost €7, not more, and it contains 12 sheets. Yes, we have here 12 sheets, and the paper is proper paper to work with different techniques in watercolor, what makes it an easy way to do quick sketches while going on the travel, and as well to work with interesting techniques like it is wet on wet technique, wet on dry technique. Obviously, you can have another opinion about this sketchbook. I would be really happy to see your comments below. So don't hesitate to write me down. As well, if you have any additional questions regarding this paper, please as well leave in the comment below. I will be really happy to answer all of your questions. Don't forget to subscribe, to comment, and to like this video. And till the next time, bye!